Welcome to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast, where we discuss all things wellness.
I'm Elanie Welch, nutritionist.
And I'm Kay Boyer, health enthusiast. Welcome back, Renegades.
Welcome, Renegades.
Gosh, now, y'all have only been, we're still on track. Like, you've been 1 week since you've heard from us. Well, we haven't heard from you guys in like 100 years, it feels like. Maybe 10 weeks, 12 weeks.
It does feel like an entire lifetime because now we have a new tiny renegade who's joined the bunch.
Dare I say, our favorite guest
Our favorite guest we've had. Noah, say hi.
Baby Noah.
If you are audio only, this is your official cue to switch over to watching our video podcasts.
Absolutely. You're not going to want to miss this. There is this adorable fluff ball on Elanie's lap, and she is the most precious thing in the world.
Yes, we have Noah here joining us, my daughter.
Our newest co-host.
She doesn't say much yet, but you know, she's still working on it.
Yep, she will. She'll be a jabberbox before we know it.
So far, only gibberish comes out, but that's okay. We'll educate you soon enough.
Yes.
Yes, and we're recording this podcast with her. We'll see how it goes.
It's adorable. I might get a little more distracted than usual.
Yeah,
lady.
that's
Just
okay.
zone me back in or bring me back in.
That's okay, because today we're going to talk about her birth story.
Yes. I can't wait to share.
So it only seemed fitting that she would be here on the show with us. She's just like entranced with Auntie Kay. Look at that.
You've been hearing this voice for months and months.
I know. It's the voice she knows as well as her dad's, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because we recorded podcasts all through my pregnancy, so you got to hear Auntie Kay a lot.
Mm-hmm. You were sitting nearly in that exact position for 9 months. We've been doing this, hun bun.
It's true, yeah.
It's bananas.
So we won't record every episode with our newest co-host because I think she'd get bored. But it seemed fitting to have her here on this episode when we share her birth story.
We need to have her here as much as we can.
I agree.
Until she starts like chewing the microphones. Like, you're here. Noah, you're ours. All right?
Is that funny?
Yeah.
Auntie Kay funny.
I'm very funny.
Yay. Yeah. So anyway, everybody watch the video podcast of this so you can see Noah because it's worth seeing. I mean, I know I'm biased, but gosh, she's so cute.
You're right. Even though you're biased, no, she's adorable. She is the cutest baby in the entire world. Yes.
Right?
I'm not biased either.
Not one bit.
Well, I am so pleased to have your daughter in our lives, and your story is amazing, and I want to share it with everyone. This is really cool. This is a very special moment.
Yes.
And in the Renegade Nutrition Podcast, this is cool.
Agreed. And for those of you who are kind of new listeners or haven't listened to every episode, it did take us, me and my husband, it took us 3 years to get pregnant with Noah, 3 years of trying to get pregnant before we did. So if you haven't listened to our journey through infertility and conception, you should go back and listen to that episode because Noah's conception here was totally a miracle and totally like not unexpected in the sense that we weren't trying because we were trying very hard, but unexpected in the sense that we really didn't think we could get pregnant naturally. Mm-hmm. And we ended up getting pregnant naturally. And so I really, for anybody who wants to just feel inspired and hopeful, whatever your journey is looking like through your own life, whether it's a journey towards conception or a journey towards better health, I think our story for a lot of people has been really inspiring, and we've gotten a lot of feedback from people who found that it gave them hope, which I love, and is why I shared a very personal and intimate detail about my life on a podcast. But yeah, hopefully it brings you some hope and some joy too. And now she's here with us, and miracles do happen.
Yes, they do. And they're cute.
They're cute. Our little living proof here, huh? So today I'm going to share her birth story, and beyond her birth story, because she was a home birth, wanted to share why we chose home birth and some information on home births, and really just kind of clearing the air about them, because one thing I really feel like is there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of fear mongering, and I'd love to just clear a space where we can have an open discussion about birth and I'd love for people to understand why home births can be just as safe, if not safer, than a hospital birth. And really just, I don't know. I just feel like it's time for us to have a mind shift when it comes to birth. And there's so many accounts out there that work at that every single day, that work to help inspire women, to help prevent the fear, to educate them. And so, I just am happy to have the opportunity to be a part of that collective voice, because birth really is such an amazing experience. It does not have to be scary, even if it's intense, right? It can be challenging, it can be hard, but at no point was I scared during her birth.
Yeah.
And so I want to offer that opportunity to others who are getting ready to have a child or considering having a child, or just, I don't know.
Yep. And I think also empowering our listeners with that new mindset idea of like, oh, I can do it. It doesn't have to hurt. Even if it does hurt a little or is intense, I can handle it.
Right.
It's okay. I'm not scared. And I think that's a cool mindset to pass on to our listeners.
Absolutely. Okay. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about why we chose home birth. And I just, before I begin, and I'll say it during and after, one thing I really want is for every woman, regardless of what her birth has looked like or what she wants it to look like, to feel totally supported and to know, like, my reason for doing this podcast, for talking about these things, is not to make anybody feel shamed or guilty or bad or judged in any way, regardless of what your birth looked like, regardless of what you want for your birth. There is no right or wrong way to give birth. And the statistics that I share and the facts I share are not meant to inspire fear. They're meant to dispel it. And I think it's important that we be educated and that we make informed decisions, right? Like, to me, that's the most important thing, is that every decision is informed. And then that way we're making a decision from a place of knowledge and understanding instead of a place of fear, because no decision made out of fear is a good decision. And so I'd like to just reintroduce some logic to it. So it's definitely not meant to make anybody feel judged in any way, shape, or form. Every birth is birth. Birth is birth is birth, regardless of what it looked like. You are powerful. You are amazing. You are an instinctual being. And so just clearing the air right now, nobody needs to listen to this and feel bad or like they harmed their child by having, a different birth experience than we had. Right. This was simply what was right for us. And I'd like to explain why it was right for us. But it doesn't mean it's right for everybody. And I think that's the first thing to know in general about home birth, is it really isn't right for everybody. I think, if you're an anxious type person, if you're fearful of giving birth, hopefully this podcast will help you not be fearful of giving birth. And there's a lot of resources that can help dispel that fear. But if you're worried in any way, if you just are going to feel more relaxed and at ease in a hospital, have a hospital birth.
That's a better birth.
That's a better birth for you, right? I knew I would be more relaxed and at ease at home. And so that was the best birth for me. I knew having a child, naturally, was going to be what made me happiest. And so that's what I chose. And that's not what makes everybody happiest. And I think our mindset is such a huge part of it. And so if a home birth just conjures this anxiety, hopefully this episode will clear that for you. But even if after this episode you're like, I just can't give birth at home, it'd be too scary, then don't. Right. Because you don't need that fear while you're giving birth. You gotta definitely not that energy. Yeah, you need to be as relaxed as possible for sure. So for me, that was to be at home, and I'll kind of explain why. But if for you that's at a hospital or at a birthing center or whatever, then you do that. That's what's right for you. Yeah. Okay? Yep. So first of all, why we chose home birth was that we didn't want to go through the conventional medical model for pregnancy, and we didn't want to go through the conventional medical model for birth. And there were a few reasons for that. For me, part of why I didn't want to go through my pregnancy in the conventional medical model is that there's a lot of fear mongering. It's not uncommon to be fearful of birth, but it is unfortunate because truly 90% plus of births can really just happen naturally without any intervention. In fact, if you've ever read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, she is a home birth assistant and a midwife, and she's part of a community of women. They literally like live together in a village, and the women in her village, of which there have been thousands, give birth at home routinely. That's part of it. Is
the
people,
modern hippie. I love
the
her.
modern hippie.
Can I be Ina May?
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
And so a lot of women that want to have a natural lifestyle live together in that sort of community. And there's been thousands of plus births in that community that have all been at home, and they've had a 98% success rate with no interventions. And so that tells you that in an environment where women are being supported, where they're being encouraged, where they're being allowed to go through birth the way that their bodies want to go through birth, there's
gone through for millions of years.
Yes.
Right.
There's a 98% success rate without intervention, meaning only 2% of births in that environment required any sort of intervention, like a hospital transfer. So I think that that's really powerful. And while there's not a scientific research study, I don't know how much more of an evidence-based example you can get than thousands of women giving birth naturally at a 98% success rate, right? Like,
that's incredible.
If you're not going to do it in a like research study, at least we could look at real life examples. So I think that it's like, for me, it was important to, first of all, dispel any fear. And just being in a hospital in the first place is not the most like warm, encouraging place, right? Hospitals just kind of bring this overwhelming gloom.
Sterile,
for me.
Yeah, for you.
And I just think so many women end up dissatisfied with their birth stories. They wish it could have been better, and I didn't want that. And so I knew I could aim for a natural birth in a hospital, but I had friends who had tried for that and hadn't really gotten the experience they wanted to have because they weren't really supported in that process. As amazing as our local hospitals are, I've had several friends go through wanting to have that natural experience and not getting to have it. And so for me, it was knowing I could try for a natural birth in a hospital, but I was less likely to have the birth I wanted than if I could just be at home in my own environment. Right? Right? So
and I thought too, at the end of this, I'm sort of like a moderator or just in general, like as I am. I'll share my birth story at the end because it's a little bit of a little bit of both sides here. So anyway, keep going.
Yes, that would be amazing. And I think, home birth moms kind of are made to feel like they're naive or ignorant or uneducated or hippies even, because we choose home birth. And in truth, it really is the person who's most educated about the birth process that's more inclined to pick a natural birth or a home birth. And I'm not saying most educated in general, most educated about the birth process and the realities of the birth process, because you realize your body really is capable of doing such amazing things. And I just didn't want to be in an environment where I was being dismissed. And I know I love my OBGYN. I love her. She's amazing. If I had birthed with her in a hospital, I'm sure she would have been an incredible person throughout the process, but she's still part of the hospital system. And that system is kind of broken, if we're being really honest about it. She's not geared towards making money, right? My OBGYN she wants to help me. She wants me to have a healthy birth. She wants my baby to be healthy. That's what she cares about. But she's part of a system that cares about making money, right? So even being a really great person within that system, they're still influenced by the rules and regulations of that system. So none of what I'm saying is like doctors don't want you to have the birth you want, or nurses don't want you to have the birth you want. Like, I don't believe that. I know the nurses and midwives that are at our local hospitals are amazing, and I've heard great stories about them. So nothing I say about like the conventional medical model is meant to reflect on medical doctors or the nurses or the people that are part of that process. It's just the system. that it's part of, right?
That's fair. Yeah.
So in the traditional medical care model for pregnancy, one thing we didn't want was a bunch of ultrasounds because the risks of ultrasounds to a developing fetus are unknown. The long-term consequences have never really been studied, and the number of ultrasounds that we have over the course of a pregnancy has really increased pretty drastically over the last few decades. So by having a home birth and working with a midwife team and not going through the conventional medical model, we only had one ultrasound during our entire pregnancy. And it was optional, but it was her 20-week anatomy scan. And I'll just say, for any decision you make during pregnancy or birth, there's always going to be risk benefits, right? Mm-hmm. There's risk benefits to every choice you make. And in the case of an ultrasound, an anatomy scan at 20 weeks, they're looking at their heart development, their lung development, their kidneys, their bladders, their organs, their brains. And to me, any risks of an ultrasound were far outweighed by the benefits of knowing if there was a condition with her heart, if there was something wrong with her brain, if there was something wrong with her lungs. Because in those cases, if you can catch those things early, you can intervene and prevent infant death, right? Mm-hmm. So in that case, yes, an ultrasound was 100% worth it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the routine ultrasounds that are done just for like a dating scan or just because, like, to see how the fetus is developing, they can inspire a lot of unnecessary fear, and they're not always super accurate, and they're exposing your baby to technology that may have health consequences that we haven't measured yet. So again, if you had a lot of ultrasounds during pregnancy, don't worry. That's not meant to concern you. It's just why we didn't want them, because we just don't know yet what their effect is. And if you have a high-risk pregnancy and you need a lot of ultrasounds, again, that's a situation where the benefits of the ultrasounds outweigh the risks, right? Mm-hmm. So there are cases for that. But I think in general, going through a hospital, there are too many ultrasounds, and it's just not really necessary. And doing things as naturally as possible, to me, that's what that means. It's just intervening as little as possible. Mm-hmm. But it was really fun to see her anatomy scan and get to know there was a real baby in there and she was healthy, and finding out that it was a girl, because we didn't want to wait to find out. A lot of home birth parents do wait to find out the sex of their baby until they're born. But I didn't need any more surprises on her birthday. I figured there'd be enough surprises as it was.
And I want to decorate the nursery beforehand.
Right. So. And I just want to know who this little person is that I'm going to meet. Like,
Same.
So a normal, healthy woman with a normal, healthy pregnancy doesn't need help with labor and birth. And so that was part of why we wanted to be able to be at home, because we wanted to avoid interventions that may come to us through a hospital. And we wanted to just feel during her pregnancy like supported and cared for. I mean, during her pregnancy, every appointment with our midwives was an hour.
Yeah.
Compared to going through pregnancy in a hospital where I love my OBGYN and I would probably get to meet with her for like 5 to 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And otherwise would be with nurses. And there's no guarantee that your OBGYN is even going to be the one who's with you, like during your labor and delivery, because they may be at another labor and delivery.
Yep.
And there's probably going to be a lot of people you haven't met, don't know, who are with you during that labor and delivery process. And for me, having somebody that I met with on a regular basis for months, who I knew and loved, having that person be there at her birth, to me felt safer and more comfortable than having a room full of people I didn't know, including possibly like students.
That's fair.
Who are first time, who are just there to observe and learn. Like, I don't know. That's not something I need at my most vulnerable. So the other reason we wanted to have a home birth was to avoid anything that was a manufactured emergency. And when I talk about a manufactured emergency, what I mean is emergencies that arise because of interventions that are introduced within the hospital setting. And these include things like medications during labor. So things like a lot of the medications we use during labor, things that help ease pain, can cause serious complications. They can cause depression of the fetal breathing. They can depress the baby's heart rate, which often leads to an emergency C-section. It can decrease the responsiveness of your newborn. It can lower their APGAR scores. It can cause less vigorous nursing and difficulty latching because the baby is less alert, because a lot of the drugs that are used to block pain for the mom decrease alertness in the fetus. And regardless of what you've been told, they do reach the fetus. And these drugs have been detected in newborns for weeks after the newborn is born. So medications are not without risks, both to the mom and the baby. The medications, like pain blocking medications, can also depress the mother's natural bearing down reflex. It can suppress her ability to push effectively. It can slow down labor. Like, I remember reading All Creatures Great and Small. I was actually reading it during my pregnancy. And he's a veterinarian. That book is about a veterinarian. And in birth situations, he actually gives the birthing animals epidurals to slow down their labor in instances where he needs to be able to rotate the baby. And I thought that was really interesting that we give an epidural as like a pain block, but in historical use for animals, it actually suppresses their labor. So that tells you what effects it could have in humans, right? Medications increase the chance of you needing a C-section for failure to progress because they can slow down labor. And it can also lead to a C-section because the mother's having a hard time pushing because those bearing down reflexes are being suppressed or hidden from the mom. Do you want to sit in your seat? We'll see. Just slobbering all over me.
Adorably.
Epidurals increase the number of babies who need to be delivered by instruments, regardless of fetal position or size. So we know that epidural use is directly related to increased need for other interventions and C-sections. Inductions were another thing we wanted to avoid. Women are these days induced, at least in the United States, for any number of reasons. They can be induced really early. They can be because of like intrauterine growth restrictions. They can be induced because their baby is failure to thrive. They could be induced because of their age, their chronological age, which is one of the most frustrating things to me. They can be induced because they go past 42 weeks. And that's one thing we really didn't want to have to deal with was an induction. Okay, we're going to put this little
wiggle worm
here in her bed. Hold on. So, inductions can happen for any number of reasons. And that's one of the things we really wanted to avoid. And in an induction, when a woman is at term, can result in a woman laboring for days. 3 days sometimes, as long as. Pitocin drips increase the risk of postpartum hemorrhaging. They increase the intensity, duration, and rate of contractions during labor, and they can cause contractions that are so powerful that the uterus can actually tear. And they often necessitate epidural use because of the intensity of the contractions. And so this is one of the things that for women who wanted to have natural childbirth, who go past what's considered term, which is 42 weeks, which we'll talk about that too. But for those women who go past that length and they want to have a natural birth, a lot of times getting Pitocin or something that induces contractions makes the contractions so painful they end up needing an epidural. And then they end up needing vacuum or forceps delivery, or they need a C-section. And so they go from having this natural birth that they wanted to this very intervention laden birth, right? Which is, at the end of the day, the healthy mom and a healthy baby is what's most important. But the question you have to ask is, were those things necessary for a healthy mom and a healthy baby? The prolonged contractions that come with induction can cause fetal distress because of the intensity of the contractions. It can cause contractions that are too long, that cut your baby off from oxygen for too long, and that can increase the need for a C-section birth as well. And they're often very unnecessary. Not all pregnancies develop at the same rate. If you think about it like a bell curve, which is what it really is for gestation, human gestation is not this like exact science. Some women gestate more quickly than others because every woman's body is different, and babies gestate at different rates. So there are some women who just naturally gestate longer and are perfectly healthy. Their babies are perfectly healthy. It's their natural way of growing and developing a baby. And so when you induce a woman because she's gone past this like status 41 weeks and 6 days, you're interrupting this natural process of her body producing the hormones that are needed to signal labor, which also help postpartum to have gone through that whole process. And it's what allows the baby to get into the proper position to make labor easier and faster. And you're disrupting all of those things, and you're saying, nope, labor has to happen right now, whether your body and the baby is ready, which is why labor can then take 3 days to progress, because your body and the baby were not ready because they were not allowed to go through that natural process of proceeding towards birth. Many doctors tell women they won't let them go past 42 weeks, which is to me one of the most gross intimidation scare tactics in the medical industry. It makes me so mad. Like, your doctor cannot dictate how your birth and pregnancy goes. Nobody can tell you they won't let you do something, right? It's totally your choice. It's always your choice. If they're pressuring you to set up an induction date, you don't have to. They're pressuring you. It's not like they're not going to deliver your baby, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't make you a bad parent, but you might be made to feel that way. There's no evidence-based medical reason to not allow, quote unquote, somebody to go past 42 weeks. Women are told that the risk of stillbirth greatly increases once you get past 42 weeks, but that's not actually true. And there's two things to that. First of all, to get past 42 weeks means you actually reach 43 weeks. So when women think about going like past 42 weeks, a lot of times they get induced at 41 weeks, 6 days, right? You can also grab her if you would like.
I was thinking
Feel
about
free.
that.
You go for it. But 41 weeks, 6 days is not past 42 weeks. 42 weeks and 6 days is past 42 weeks, because for all of that time period, you're at 42 weeks. So I think it's misleading to say once you get past 42 weeks, you're at risk of stillbirth. The risk of stillbirth remains very small even after 42 weeks. It's something like 1 in 410 babies. And it's actually not really much greater than the risk of stillbirth anyway, which is like, it's hard to even say that word or hear that word when you're pregnant or when you've had a baby. It's horrible to imagine. Yes. But the truth is they happen whether you're in a hospital or not. And being at home does not really, first of all, being at home doesn't increase your risk of it. And going past 42 weeks hardly increases your risk of it. And I think it's really frustrating when women who are older are told, oh, you need to be induced by 39 weeks, because once you go past 39 weeks, you're at risk of a stillbirth because of your age. When in reality, as long as the mom and the baby are healthy, there's no reason to be induced at 39 weeks. It doesn't improve your chances of a healthy birth as long as the mom and the baby are still healthy and the baby's not under stress and the mom's not under stress. Mm-hmm. So that's there
are signs of those things.
Yeah, there's signs of those things. Exactly. Another intervention that's often used in a hospital birth is fetal monitoring, where they screw in an electrode into the baby's scalp to monitor their heart rate. That has not been scientifically or medically shown to improve birth outcomes at all. And it, in fact, increases the risk of infection and unnecessary C-section, because there are natural variations in a baby's heart rate. And sometimes those variations may trigger a doctor to say, oh, the baby's heart rate is dropping. We need to get them out right now and do a C-section, when in reality, that might have just been a natural variation in the baby's heart rate. So the fact that fetal monitoring hasn't improved infant mortality outcomes at all is evidence that we don't need to do it. And yet we continue to do it oftentimes in the hospital, especially if you have received Pitocin or an epidural, then a lot of times they'll monitor the baby's heart rate because those things can negatively impact the baby's heart rate. I think it's interesting that C-sections, again, something we wanted to avoid, in the US have increased from 4.5% in 1965 to over 35% today without any significant improvement in infant maternal outcomes. Roughly half of the C-sections performed today are what we would consider unnecessary and are avoidable. Recent data is hard to find, but in 1991 alone, doctors performed over 349,000 unnecessary C-sections in the US. C-sections increase the risk of breathing difficulties and other complications for infants. They increase the risk of infection for mom. And we see a lot of times because the baby isn't exposed to the mother's vaginal bacteria and flora, the baby's flora doesn't develop appropriately. Auntie Kay over there is taking care of it. I can keep talking. Yeah. And that's one of the problems a lot of times is that babies that are born via C-section don't get that early exposure to bacteria, and they end up with an imbalanced gut bacteria, which leads to things like food sensitivities and allergies and asthma, and all the other things that come from an imbalanced gut bacteria, which we've talked about a lot in this podcast. So again, none of this is meant to scare anybody, right? Like, it sounds like a bunch of scary information, but it's just to show that hospital births aren't necessarily risk-free and that being at home doesn't increase your risks of complications. Hey there, Renegades. Elanie here, briefly interrupting this episode of the Renegade Nutrition podcast. I wanted to highlight a company that Kay and I have recently discovered that we love, and that company is Bulletproof. Bulletproof sells high-quality nutritional supplements, and every product that Kay and I have tried from them personally, we have found to be excellent. It's important when you choose a supplement that it contain the bioactive forms in order for it to be effective, and Bulletproof has just the right forms in just the right amounts. Right now, if you go to bulletproof.com and use the code RENEGADE15 at checkout, you can receive 15% off your order. That's Renegade, RENEGADE 15. Use that code at checkout to get 15% off, and we'll earn a small commission too. Thanks for your support. All right, back to this week's episode of the Renegade Nutrition Podcast.
All right, we're back after a short break of the napping baby, Elanie.
I know. What a funny thing.
We're going to be talking really soft now.
Now we're going to be talking softly because now my baby is asleep on me. That's hilarious.
All the moms out there are like, we relate.
I feel like, what's a podcast if it's not real?
Right. This is real.
This is real life. We'll see how long she stays asleep
wakes
on
up,
me.
it's about to get real.
Yeah, real. So to pick up where we left off at that podcast when we took a break to put my baby to sleep, none of what I'm saying and sharing here is meant to scare anybody. And I know what I'm saying is I want to dispel the fear, and it may sound like, oh my gosh, things are dangerous no matter what. But again, remember that for a woman who's given a chance to just let her body do naturally what it wants to do with the proper support, in the Ina May's community, it was a 98% success rate. And our bodies really are amazing and are so capable and so able of just birthing without intervention. And it's funny, I think the first time I ever really thought about that was like years ago, before I was like considering having a baby or getting pregnant myself. But it was when we were getting ready for our goats to have babies. And we had been, we'd been reading all these things about how to help your goat give birth and the different interventions that they're going to need. And like everybody that talked about it is like, yeah, you'll have to like reach in and help guide the baby's head out and like all this stuff, right? And I was really terrified about being a midwife for my goat because I was like, how am I going to know what I'm feeling? Like, I'm not a veterinarian. And like, it just sounded like there were so many emergencies. And then like a couple weeks before they were going to give birth, I found this blog where this lady was talking about how unnecessary it is for people to help their goats give birth. And she was just saying people think they need to intervene because they intervene, and the birth goes fine when they intervene.
I'll be right. But for all of existence of goats, they've had baby goats.
Right. They've been doing it without intervention.
Forever.
And she was like, they don't give their goat a chance to birth without intervention. So they just assume because they intervened and things went fine when they intervened, that's what needs to happen, and that things wouldn't go fine if they didn't intervene. She was like, I have never once in like 30 years of kidding had to intervene in a goat giving birth. Like, they've all given birth fine. And she was like, don't you think it's interesting that like when goat owners miss a goat's birth, they're always like surprised because everything went fine? Like,
that is so funny because I'm like, every animal in the woods has a baby just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was like it's just so funny. That was my first introduction to like natural birth in general. I remember reading that blog and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, if we just don't intervene in the birthing process, like,
was good.
They're probably going to be fine. We just don't know what it looks like without intervention because we always intervene. Mm-hmm. So, and then my goats ended up giving birth. We were there with them, but we did nothing to intervene, and all of them were fine. One goat had quadruplets, one goat had twins, and one goat had a single kid.
Had to go there.
Yeah, and all three of them were fine, and all three of their births looked totally different. Each goat labored very differently. Wow. They reacted differently to their babies after their babies were born. And yet all of them were fine, all of them were healthy, and all of them parented the way that they were meant to parent and gave birth the way they were meant to give birth. And I remember going through that process and just thinking,
total
like,
mind shift.
Exactly, like how much that could apply to like human births, where I was like, wow, I wonder how often we intervene in human births and assume it's necessary because we did it. Mm-hmm. And we don't actually know what the outcome would have been if we hadn't done it. Mm-hmm. But like maybe a lot of our interventions in human births are also unnecessary. And that's true. Swear to God, that was my introduction to like natural birth.
Yeah.
And me starting to research natural birth and the risks of interventions and learning about interventions and where interventions started. And honestly, we could give an entire podcast on that topic, and I don't want to do that because what I want to do is tell Noah's story and help dispel any of the fear that surrounds birth. But that was very much our experience of, even in the situation of giving birth to her, which would have looked very different in a hospital as opposed to at home, I just realized how much interventions could occur that are so unnecessary. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so.
And I want to throw in a disclaimer, because I think as a modern society, it's almost like, I'm like, wait, we can't say this on the air. We're going to offend so many people. And we're trying to say this all with a disclaimer that a little bit, I feel like we have gotten a little bit softer as a people and a little bit more worried as a people and not able to handle hard things. So for us to like, and for Elanie, for you to say this, I'm like, can we say this on air? Because I feel like we all got a little soft. But I do think like, no, be brave, Elanie. You tell this out there. And there is the exception. Like, of course, if you do have some hard health, and so you know your pregnancy is going to be hard, get all this modern, beautiful interventions that we have. Absolutely. But Elanie's just saying, like, let's let natural have a chance. Because look how we've evolved for tens of thousands of hundreds of years. Like, we're doing okay. We keep reproducing. We're doing all right. You know, and I know people would be like, well, back in the great grandma days, like you would lose some babies. And that's true. And that's statistical. Like but with the INMAs, you know, like 98% didn't even need intervention. Mm-hmm. So even though this feels like a scary podcast for us to say, because I'm a little bit like, oh, everyone's mad at us and we're just privileged to have, you know, like these healthy births. But think, you know, just kind of open the door up to, but wait, you know, like, can we open the door for more natural births? Because millennia's, we've been doing okay, but we're so thankful for modern ways for the exception when we need to intervene. But yeah, if that all makes sense.
I think so, because what we talked about were why the interventions necessitate more interventions, right? So the fact that like getting medication increases risk of things like a cesarean section being necessary, right? But that wouldn't happen if you were at home and you were having a natural birth. And so I think what I want to dispel is the fear around birthing, because a lot of those are manufactured emergencies. And again, there are times when a hospital birth is necessary and a medicated birth is necessary. And medicated births, you know, an epidural is a compassionate choice for a mother who is exhausted and struggling. And if you needed one or want one, there is nothing wrong with that. I'm just making you aware
with their risks.
that it comes with a risk and it's not totally risk-free, but don't feel like if you need it, you need it, right? Like, again, it's the benefits and risk ratio. And if it's going to improve your birth experience, then it's worth it, right? If it's not going to improve your birth experience, then maybe it's not worth it. But that's such an individual choice. Right. And I think, you know, it's, again, the human body is very capable of doing amazing things. I think we reiterate that a lot on this podcast. Like, we really believe in that.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be being true to myself to then turn around and have, you know, a lot of interventions in my birth because I'm afraid of not being able to do it naturally, when in reality, my body was built to give birth. And that's one of the beautiful things about working with a midwife team, whether you're at home or in a hospital, because you can work with a midwife team at a hospital too. But one of the nice things about that is midwives that do home births, they firmly believe you're more than capable of doing it. And they're very trained. I would never suggest doing a home birth without trained, qualified professionals there, right? That's not at all what I did or what I'm suggesting. But having trained professionals, I mean, one of our midwives on our midwife team was a labor and delivery nurse at the University of Iowa Hospital. Like, she's more than qualified. And the other one has been a nurse midwife, a certified nurse midwife. And together they have decades and decades worth of experience. And I think the other thing about, you know, many people will make you feel like home births are dangerous, right? The first thing my OBGYN said when I told her, like, hey, we're going to have a home birth, is like, well, I'd really rather you didn't. I feel much safer with you being in a hospital. There's a lot of risks to a home birth. But that's actually just not true. That's not true. There are no more risks to a home birth than there are to having a hospital birth, because in truth, if you're working with a qualified nurse midwife team, one of the first things they told us that really set our minds at ease, because of course I asked, what happens if there's an emergency and you're at home? You know, you don't have access to like an operating room within 35 seconds, right? That's the amazing part about being in a hospital, is when something goes wrong, you have instant care. And they reassured us that, you know, very, 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 very few of the emergencies that occur during birth occur without any warning.
Yeah, there's signs.
And a trained nurse midwife team, they know all the signs, all the warnings, everything that is like leading up to an emergency, right? So you're not going to be in a situation where suddenly there's an emergency nobody was expecting. They have been monitoring you and looking for the signs. And if they detect any of the signs that things are starting to go south, it's a hospital transfer. And they do it at a pace and at a rate where you get to the hospital in time, right? And only 10% are, for our midwife team, only 10% of their births end up being a hospital transfer, which means 90% of the time they don't need a hospital transfer. And that's been their experience for decades worth of births. So again, 90% of their birth population has not needed any interventions at all, and 10% did. I think that's pretty outstanding when you just consider that in a hospital there's a 35% cesarean rate, like just of all births, regardless of a mom's health. So
yeah, which is a huge statistic. Wow.
A huge statistic, right? So it just kind of opens your eyes up to what happens when we don't intervene and when we just trust our bodies to do what they're naturally meant to do. And really, truthfully, like, most of the time, your body can handle even abnormalities in the birthing process. Your body can handle a breech birth. Your body can handle a cord being wrapped around the baby's neck. Your body can handle hemorrhaging. Like, there are things that I think we are very afraid of in our society that are just...
your medical professionals know those boundaries.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And, you know, and a qualified, certified medical team at a home birth. I mean, our home birth team knows how to handle hemorrhage and have the tools they need to handle hemorrhage. They have the tools they need to handle a baby's cord being wrapped around the neck, which is actually not such a big deal. It happens a lot, and it's a fairly normal thing to happen during birth. Some people even think that's to protect the baby's cord from prolapsing and causing the waters to break early. Interestingly enough.
Who knew?
Yeah. It can be a medical emergency if the cord is restricting their airway, but a lot of times it's not. So again, they know how to handle most minor emergencies, and any of the major emergencies are generally things that there are signs that point to something happening. They're monitoring the baby's heart rate with a Doppler, so externally, so there's no like internal heart rate monitoring, which can cause the risks that I talked about earlier. So they're monitoring the baby's heart rate every half an hour. They're checking her heart rate, making sure it's all going fine. So a qualified, again, I'm emphasizing a qualified midwife team can really provide you with the tools and resources you need to have a safe home birth. So hopefully I've kind of just sold that concept enough just to clear the air about home births being reckless or dangerous or whatever. Like, I think on more than one occasion, I told somebody I was having a home birth and I got like an eye roll, like, like I'm uneducated or ignorant. And it's such a frustrating response because in reality, I'm just aware of what happens a lot of times with hospital interventions, and I wanted to avoid them. And it's not just me being like a crunchy hippie mom. It's me just wanting to have the birth experience that's best for me and my baby, not best for everyone else. And I never try to push it on anybody. I just kind of feel like I have to defend my choice off the bat because I think so many people just kind of blow you off, right?
Right.
I don't know.
Yep. You're so right.
So again, like having a home birth, you get to give birth in the comfort of your own home. And for us, like I just want to share Noah's story because our birth would have looked very different in a hospital had we been there versus what it looked like at home. You awake.
You awake.
Stinker. So so Noah was due, her due date was June 14th. I thought I would be pregnant with her for at least another week. I was kind of hoping and expecting like a summer solstice baby. Like I thought like June 21st. I think our midwives thought we still had a ways to go because I was comfortable and I wasn't huge and I wasn't swelling and I wasn't showing any signs of like pre-labor anything. I felt like she was going to be in there for forever, truthfully, but I was okay with her staying in there. Like I was definitely not at the point of like a lot of moms when they're like, get out, you know. I was very comfortable. So June 12th going into the 13th, midnight on the dot, I rolled over in bed and my water broke, which was a complete surprise, but I knew that that's what was happening. It was a like distinct feeling. It was just like gushing water that I could not control, and I had not peed myself my entire pregnancy, and I was pretty sure I wasn't peeing myself now. And so I tried not to wake my husband up, getting up and like stumbling to the bathroom, but then like as I got to the bathroom, like more water started gushing out, and it was just kind of carpet everywhere. And I knew like, hey, labor could be a while and we might be up all the next night. And so no reason to like wake my husband up and have us both. It's midnight, right? Like there's no reason to be awake all night because I might just have, you know, light contractions, few and far between. He doesn't need to be awake. Even if I am, we don't need two of us to be exhausted. Like he was going to be my birth coach. So I needed him to be as aware as possible. And we read through the Bradley method, did a lot of research into the Bradley coaching method, which I highly recommend. But anyway, so I needed him to be healthy and aware and awake because he was going to be my birth coach and helping coach me through my contractions. So I tried not to wake him up, but I definitely did wake him up because I was like in the bathroom with the light on, and then my water broke again, and then I was trying to like mop the floor. Cleaning
up your mess.
So then he woke up, and And then I had like very, 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 very light contractions. Like, are they contractions? Every like 15 minutes. And then they just kind of petered off. It was like every 15 minutes for an hour. And then it kind of like spread out to half an hour and then 45 minutes. And by 4 a.m., they were totally gone.
Wow. But your water had broke. Wow.
Yeah. So again, in a conventional medical birth, that starts the clock ticking, right? They want the baby out within 24 hours of your water breaking because of the risk of infection.
Yep.
With a home birth model, that looks differently because they don't set a time limit as long as you don't spike a fever. If you spike a fever, which would indicate infection, then it's a hospital transfer. Because again, the midwives are trained. They know what necessitates interventions, and having a fever is one of those things because you don't want to risk infection to the mom or to the baby. So another scenario in which you can still safely be at home as long as you don't have a fever. So yeah, by 4 a.m., my contractions were gone. I fell back asleep around then because it was pretty hard to sleep. You're like excited, right? And first of all, I'm not expecting my baby to be coming. And I'm like running through the list of things that we haven't gotten done. And I'm like, oh my God, we have so much stuff we still wanted to do in the next week before she came, or even 2 weeks, because I thought she might be pretty late. So we called our midwives around 7. I think I woke up around 7 a.m. We called our midwives, just let them know. They kind of reassured me, hey, as long as you don't spike a fever, it's fine. We're not setting our watches or setting a time limit. Like, you can labor as long as you need to. We'll just keep an eye on your temperature. Keep us posted throughout the day. So at 11 a.m., I already had an acupuncture appointment scheduled because I had weekly acupuncture appointments at that point just to keep me comfortable. I had like some hip pain and stuff in my pregnancy.
Yeah.
So I already had that appointment. So I went and asked my acupuncturist, who we've interviewed on this podcast, Alice. She's amazing. I asked her, hey, is there some stuff you can do to kind of augment my labor, get things jump started? My water broke last night around midnight. It's 11 a.m. now, and I'm still not having any contractions. And even though my midwives don't have a clock ticking, I know that if I spike a fever, it's going to be a hospital transfer. So I'm feeling the time pressure because I'm feeling like the longer I go, the more chance there is of an infection. And I don't want to have just gone through everything we've gone through the past 9 months and then end up with a hospital transfer, right? That would be a bummer. Like, just expecting to have a home birth and having a birth tub and having all of our supplies on hand and having a room set up for it and all this stuff, and then just going to the hospital. So anyway, so I felt the need to get labor started, even though the midwives weren't putting any sort of pressure on us for that. So my acupuncturist was like, yeah, absolutely. There's things I can do to augment labor. Just so you know, for anybody who's facing an induction at a hospital, there is acupuncture that can help get things started in a more natural way, and it can take up to 24 hours. So you want to get an appointment scheduled before your induction day, of course. But for me, it was like, yeah, this would be great. Like, have this like tool in my pocket. How wonderful that I already had an appointment set up for 11 a.m. today. So I went to that appointment. She did some needlework to help get things started. She let me know it could take 24 hours, just to go home, relax, get things done, which we did. And then starting around like 5:30, I started to feel those really light contractions kind of starting again. And I called my friend Rendy and I asked her, because she's a massage therapist, hey, can you do some massage work to kind of help speed this process along? Because now it's almost 6 p.m. and my water has been broken since midnight.
Wow.
Right? So I'm still feeling like I don't want to risk infection. I don't want to spike a fever. I don't want to, necessitate any sort of intervention. And so she says, yeah, come on over. I can help you out. So she does like a half an hour massage session and works on my feet and my legs just to help, again, like,
sounds amazing.
Yeah. Stimulate the blood flow. And if anything, just kind of help my body relax. Because obviously there is going to be a baby within the next 24 hours at some point, like some way, somehow, which is what I kept telling myself, like, okay, there's going to be a baby here. Like, this is exciting, right?
Go.
So then around 8 p.m., I would say my contractions really picked up. Like all of a sudden, I went from having basically nothing of like, oh, is this a contraction? Is it not a contraction? To like hardly can talk through it. And they were about 5 to 7 minutes apart. So I kind of skipped that whole early active labor thing and just went straight into active labor.
Then you didn't have to guess, is this a contraction?
Yeah.
This is a contraction.
Yeah, it was like so fast, I think, after the massage appointment that like we had stopped on the way home. I didn't really want to eat. I wasn't hungry. Christopher was like, hey, can we pick up some like Mexican food so I can just eat something? We like got home and he started eating. And at that point, I was like, he didn't even get halfway through before I was like, I need you to be here now with me. Like,
he's like, but my tacos.
Yeah. I'm like, dude, you need to coach me through these contractions. And what was happening was a lot of back and hip labor, which I did not expect because I had been doing all of the spinning babies exercises, which I highly recommend for any woman in her second and third trimester of pregnancies, just because the exercises feel really good to do anyway. They're nice stretches, they're gentle exercises. They really do help prepare your body for birth. And I suppose that's one thing I would say is I don't recommend doing a home birth if you're not physically fit and able. Like you should be doing exercises. So I had been doing the spinning babies exercises, and those are meant to help avoid back labor because they make sure that your baby's head is positioned correctly within your pelvis. Wow. But I do think because her water broke, she just went down into my pelvis kind of fast. And her head wasn't quite positioned right. And so even though she wasn't like, she was facing the correct way. I mean, obviously she was head down and she was like not sunny side up, you know, but just like her head might have been a little bit tilted, or maybe her hand was up by her head, because I know her hand had been up by her head just like a day before. Either way, it was a lot of back and hip labor, and it was very intense.
Yeah, that's painful.
It was, and I wasn't prepared for it. And like all of the exercises, like visualization techniques and everything that Christopher and I had done for months to prepare for labor, like kind of went out the window because it was all like, imagine the uterus contracting, and you're doing these visualization techniques and like picturing it being like a wave, and like it's all geared towards uterine contractions, of which I felt none. I mean, I literally did not feel my uterus at all. I could have not had a uterus for all I cared. It just literally felt like my hips were being pulled apart. So it was like all our visualization techniques kind of went out the window, and it was just basically him like holding my hand through contractions and like telling me I'm doing a good job, which I did not feel like I was doing.
He was in pain management at this point.
And I really was like way more vocal than I thought I would be. And it's really hard to like, the visualization techniques would have helped you relax while the uterus was contracting, because it was like, imagine it being a bag, and here's all the muscles, and here's how they work, and here's how you picture them. Like literally this whole thing, we had to walk through every contraction, which didn't work because I couldn't feel any of those things. So
you're just like trying to just not go insane with pain right now.
Yeah. So the two things that helped me, one was a breathing technique to keep everything relaxed. Like it's the horse lips. Like it's that like, yeah. Right. And then it relaxes your jaw, because if your jaw is relaxed, then your body is relaxed. So it keeps you from like tensing muscles that like, so I would just have to do those with every contraction. I just did that because I knew I needed to keep my jaw relaxed. Yeah, literally the whole time. And I'm like, this is the only thing I can think of to keep my body relaxed. And then the other thing that helped was my friend Brittany had a home birth a couple weeks before I did. And she said one of the things she had practiced was like hypnobirthing. And one of the relaxation techniques is you visualize your body, like your cervix opening and softening. And she said saying that, like opening, softening, it kind of like helped her body relax. Yeah. So I did that too. Like through contractions, I would alternate between like saying that and then doing like the horse lips breathing, because I was like, I just needed tools to help me relax, because the visualization relaxation tools were not going to be available to me anymore.
I had a lot more explicits in my my dialogue.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I felt calm the whole time because I felt safe. I mean, because at that point I'm at home and the person that's with me is my husband.
Yes, when you love the most.
Yeah, the lights are off. My like salt lamp by my bed is on.
Yes.
We're in our bedroom. Like I was on the floor, but on my like hands and knees because that kind of helped. But I feel safe. Like I don't have people that I don't know coming in and out of my room. I'm not hooked up to an IV. My movements
lights,
not restricted. There's not fluorescent lights. Yeah. Like I felt very calm and safe. It was intense. Right.
It's intense.
Yeah. And so let's see. So 8 o'clock, that was when that started. By 11:40. So yeah, 11:40, just a couple hours later, my contractions were 2 to 4 minutes apart and very intense. And so my husband called the midwives because they were about an hour away, which I felt bad calling them at almost midnight. But
that's their job.
That's their job. They're used to it. Yep. They're used to it. He called them, and so they got there just shortly after like 1 a.m. and they got the birth tub ready for me. And they were just so reassuring. Like the minute Allie, one of our midwives, walked in, she was like, "This is what I love to see." Like my husband was coaching me. I'm like working through the contractions. It just made me feel so good. I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm doing this. I'm doing okay then."
Okay. Thumbs up.
Because at the moment, I feel like nothing is going how I pictured. Which is like difficult when you have this picture in your mind of what your birth is going to look like. And I can just say now from experience, it just absolutely will not look like what you picture it. But it can still be beautiful and amazing. Right. It's just not going to look like.
Yes.
It just isn't.
Like idealism, right? It's out the window.
And people would tell me that. People would be like, your birth is not going to look like how you expect it. Yeah. And I would think that was really discouraging. But now on the other side of it, I don't think that's discouraging. I just think it's like reality. Like, it just doesn't look like how you expect it to, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Yeah. It just was different. I was way more vocal than I expected. I just didn't labor at all the way I thought that I would. My husband didn't get to play like the coaching role in the way he wanted to. I'm sure that was disappointing for him.
And he didn't get to eat his tacos, guys.
Yeah, he didn't get to eat burrito. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a burrito.
He had half a burrito in the fridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I think that was probably hard for him too, because he had all these tools to help me and he didn't get to use them either. Yeah. Instead, he was just like,
and they feel helpless.
Yeah, he's like, you can do it. I don't know.
Yes, you can.
And I did. You'll love this, Kay. Like multiple times to myself, just say, you can do hard things.
You can do hard things.
You can do hard things. Yes. You can do hard things. Yes. You can do hard things.
So for the listeners, we've talked that Elanie and I and a group of girls have climbed like a 14er in Colorado. That's a high mountain. Anyway, so in this, you're the fourth woman that we've taken on this who has had a baby after climbing it. And literally they all say, like, doing a mountain climb prepared me the most to have a baby, because when you're on the mountain climb, I can do hard things. You keep going, push yourself, and just like having a baby, right? If you can climb a mountain, you can have a baby.
And it really is so much like having a baby in so many ways, because you start out the hike and you're like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I got this. And then you get like midway through and you're like, I'm not so sure that I'm going to finish this.
Yes.
And then you get to the final like 200 feet, at least for us climbing Quandary, when it was like straight up those final 200 feet and it's like covered in ice and you're like, absolutely.
No oxygen.
I'm just going to stop right now.
Yeah, you have no energy left. Somebody
let me off this mountain. I'm done. Yes. I'm just going to sit here. Right?
I could die right now. I don't even care. Yep.
But then you do push through and you get to the top of the mountain and you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I finished. And then it's all downhill from there. That's literally what giving birth was like.
Literally. Good training.
And Erica, my hiking buddy, shout out to Erica. She and I were like the whole way, you can do hard things. You can do hard things. You can do hard things. And then we got to the top and we were like, oh, thank God we did it. We did it. It's beautiful up here. The view is amazing. It was worth the climb.
Yep.
That's what birth is like, guys. So anyway, I was saying that like you can do hard things.
You can do hard things.
So the midwives got there around 1. They got the tub filled up for us. They were really reassuring. They started monitoring her heart rate. Everything looked really good. I got in the tub, which felt really amazing. But contractions stayed at that like kind of, they did slow down a little bit getting in the tub, but they kind of stayed at that really intense back and hip labor. And it was that way for like a couple of hours. I don't really know how long I was in the tub, but at some point they felt like labor probably just wasn't progressing the way it should. Okay. And that the like back and hip pain, it was enough that they wanted to check the position of the baby's head because it just seemed like maybe something's not quite right. Okay. So they checked her head and couldn't quite tell, but they did know I was about 5 centimeters dilated, which normally they don't check. That's one of the nice things about being at home is they're not checking those things because cervical dilation isn't really at any point an indicator of how your labor is going to progress because you can dilate really slow or you can dilate really fast.
That bit me in the butt. I was dilated at a 6. And the lady said, well, you're in labor. But I was like, well, I walked to the appointment. I'm really not. And they're like, nope, you're going to have the baby by today. And then they had to put, and I wasn't. Anyway, continue. Yeah. It was terrible. But
yeah, you can be dilated for weeks.
Like walking around.
Or you can go from like 1 to 10 in like an hour. Yeah. Like it's just not an indication of how things are going to progress. Yeah. So normally the midwives don't check, but because they were already checking the positioning of her head, they checked. So I knew it was at like 5 centimeters dilated, which I felt kind of neutral about. It's not like great. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I would have rather have been halfway 10. There. Yeah. I would have rather have been at 10. But it was better than being at like 2 or 3. Right. So they had me get out of the tub and they said, okay, we want to drop her out of your pelvis. So we're going to do some, have you labor through some different positions to drop her out of your pelvis so that she can drop back in and have her head positioned correctly and hopefully like press on your cervix more and some of the intense like back and hip labor. And I would say that those like positions, like switching those positions up and laboring through those different positions, like in inversion where your legs are up on a chair and your head and arms are down on the ground and you're like essentially doing like a modified handstand, obviously well supported by a team of midwives and a chair. Yes. But like laboring that way was really crazy intense. Like probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And we labored through 3 contractions that way. And then with the last one, they had me like kind of not stand up, but get to my knees and raise my arms and head up really fast. So the idea was dropping her out of my pelvis and then quickly dropping her back into my pelvis and hopefully repositioning her head. So then they had me lay down because we were pretty tired at this point just because the contractions had been so intense. And I don't know what time it was really at this point, maybe like 3 or 4 a.m. And we'd only been going since like 8 o'clock the night before. Like it really hadn't been that long, but you're pretty tired after that much. So they had me get in bed and they were like, hey, you know, it had slowed my contractions down. So now they were about 5 minutes apart. And they said, you know, hey, like, obviously you're probably not going to sleep, but just rest in between contractions. You get some rest, let Christopher rest because it's probably still going to be a while. So I laid in bed. None of us got rest because he's just listening to me bellow, you know? Yes. And when you say contractions are 5 minutes apart, what it really means is it's 5 minutes from the start of one to the start of the other. So that includes a minute of a contraction.
Yes. 4 minutes off, but 1 minute.
So they kind of started picking back up. At one point, the midwife checked and I was still at 5 centimeters dilated, which was really discouraging, which again is why they don't normally check. But I just had been like having this intense labor for so long. And then to find out like, okay, now it's been like 2 hours and I haven't dilated at all. Felt like, I feel like if I had been in a hospital at that point, it would have been like, your labor's not progressing. You know what I mean? Right. But anyway, by around 6, I think it was around 6 a.m., I was like, I have to get out of bed and I need to get back into the tub. Like, I can't labor in bed anymore.
Oh my.
Contractions were about 2 minutes apart again, so they'd
and the midwife
back
slept
up
at your house, like they're there.
They're there. Okay. Oh yeah, they're there.
Yep.
They take turns sleeping. So one is coming and monitoring the baby's heart rate every half an hour. And everyone's available, of course, but they take turns sleeping. So they would go, I think, into her nursery and lay down for a bit. It was actually really smart having a team of 3 there, basically, because they can rest and save their energy and
through the night.
Through the night. So that they're at their best. So around 6 a.m., they heated the tub back up for me. I got back in it, which felt really nice. And I do think it helped. It definitely helped to reposition her because her head started hitting my cervix. And so I started to actually dilate. So around 6:30, I was 8 centimeters dilated, which was nice. And my body just started to push on its own. Which was actually kind of, I think, the only reason the midwife checked was because I was starting to like involuntarily push. And she just wanted to make sure it wasn't too soon. But it wouldn't have mattered if it was. There was nothing I could do about it.
Yep.
Like my body was like, nope, I'm pushing. I'm pushing. Like I was like, I don't know what's happening, but with every contraction, I'm bearing down and I can't stop it from happening.
Yes.
So they were like, yep, just don't like add to it right now, but like let your body do what it needs to do. Like the midwives totally trust the body. They trust it to do the right thing, you know, and they encourage you to believe that too. They're like, okay, just trust your body, go with it, do what you need to. So that was around 6:30. And I essentially went through an hour and a half of those like pushy contractions. And then right around 8, it was funny. They had just sent my husband to go make coffee for everyone because he needed a break. He'd been coaching me since for 12 hours, essentially, since like 8 the night before. And so they were like, it's still going to be a while. Maybe go make coffee, take a little bit of a breather. And as soon as he walked out, I like felt her head pop, like, I don't know how to explain the sensation. It felt like a popping sensation. And it was like, boop. And I was like, I think her head is going to emerge soon. And they were like, really? So they like pulled out a mirror and checked. And they're like, yep, that's her head. So they had to call Christopher back, like having just sent him away. It was so funny. Like he's literally just left. And they're like, it's going to be a while. And then they're like, never mind, baby's coming. Psych. And he's like, wait, what?
That's funny.
So then, he came back in. And then it was about 20 minutes of pushing from there, of like real, like pushing, like me actively pushing as opposed to just letting my body do what it wanted to do and like bearing down. And then 8:23, she was born.
My little peanut.
She was born in the water, which was really amazing. I had no feelings on like a water versus land birth. I didn't like know what I wanted to do. We just wanted to have the option to have a water birth, and we wanted a tub because they call it like the midwife's epidural, where it just can be really relaxing and relieve some of the pain for the mom without obviously like posing the same risks. So we knew we wanted to have a tub and then have the option for a tub birth. And they did have me stand for a few of the pushing contractions because then they held a mirror and I could actually like see her head coming out.
I love it. Yep.
Which was making my pushes really effective because it was like you see what you're accomplishing. But then when her head really started to like emerge, I was like, nope. I want back in the water. Please put me back in the water.
That's amazing.
So then I just got back in the water and my husband just held my arms and supported me, and I was in a squat like in the water, and then I was able just to push her out, and like they handed her to me just upside down in the water, so I brought her to my chest, and then she was instantly crying and screaming, which is such an amazing moment. Like you just you wait for that, right? Like you wait to hear them cry because it's what lets you know that like everything's okay. And she was on all cylinders right away.
Full of personality,
head full of hair, obviously.
Full head
of hair. And it was such an amazing feeling because Obviously, it's very intense pushing a baby out of your body. Like, the burn is real.
The burn is real. The ring of fire.
The ring of fire is real. Like,
Johnny Cash sang about that.
Absolutely. And it burns. The ring of fire. The ring of fire. Yeah, it really is intense, like super intense. Yeah. But the amazing thing is, like, the second that they're out of you, it's like all of that is just gone.
Yes.
Truly.
Yep.
And I remember our veterinarian, she was like, everybody says you forget the pain, and it's such a lie. You don't forget the pain. But for me personally, I did. Like, the moment I was holding her, I didn't forget the intensity of it. Yeah. Like, the intensity of labor. I still remember the intensity of it, but I could not for the life of me really describe the pain to you, like, in the way that I could have during labor. Yeah. When I was experiencing it, like, as soon as I held her, I was like, it's just funny because during labor, I was like, I'm never going to do this again. I don't know why. Right. Why did I do this?
Multiple kids.
Right. Like, why am I at home? Why am I not on painkillers? What am I doing with my life? Like, what is wrong with me? And the minute I was holding her, I was like, I could do 5 more of these.
Yeah, I want 5 babies. Those hormones that kick in.
Yeah. I want all of you. I want
a baseball team. Chris is like, we're going to wait on that a hot minute.
But it was just to me, it was so amazing. Like, we set the tub up in our 3 seasons, and it was like we were out there as the sun was rising and the birds were starting to sing, and it's all this gorgeous natural light. The 3 seasons is my favorite room in the house. I have my amazing midwife team that I've been working with for 9 months, who I love and treasure, who know me. Yes. You know, I'm surrounded by these ladies that are encouraging and really, truly, really hands off. I mean, besides, they were there if we wanted it, but they just let Christopher coach me. I mean, except for giving him a break at the end when Moira, one of the midwives, just held my hand and sending Christopher off, they just let us be, which I think was the most amazing thing they could do, because it made me feel so good and encouraged and safe, because I knew if they thought we needed help, they would be helping. Yeah. And the fact that they weren't made me feel so confident.
Yeah. And so empowered in this natural way.
Yeah. Of wow, they're not helping, which means we're doing fine. Yeah. On our own, which was just really looking back at it, I think that was one of the most amazing gifts they could have given us, was being there and being present. And just bringing this warm, calm, loving, compassionate atmosphere, but being totally hands off. Yeah. And not making us feel like we were doing anything wrong.
Yeah. Awesome.
It was so cool. How much more empowered can you feel than somebody being like, yeah, you got this. Yeah. You don't need us. We're just here. Yeah. Holler.
Let nature take its course.
Yeah. And obviously they check things, and they had this the Doppler that they could check her heart rate with could go underwater. Yeah. Which was really amazing.
Yes. They know what they're doing.
Because you can stay in the tub. You don't have to get out every half an hour. Yeah. So good anyway, investment. All I'm going to say is, the midwives, they're incredible. Having a home birth was incredible. I'm not going to say it was pain-free. It was not. It was incredibly intense. It was absolutely the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
Harder than a mountain.
Yep, I do feel in both ways, the mountain prepared me for the home birth, and the home birth will prepare me for the mountain. Because I'll be climbing the mountain next time. I'll be like, this is nothing.
This is nothing.
And I think too,
hear me roar.
One of the things I always hear people say when they talk about natural births is you don't have to be a hero or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But truthfully, the most amazing thing about having a home birth was how empowered I felt after that process of having gone through one of the hardest things on earth on my own. Mm-hmm. And you just aren't prepared for how empowering that process is. And hopefully every woman who goes through a birth, regardless of what it looks like, feels empowered and incredible, because every birth human. Is a miracle.
It is really, really cool.
And yeah, I'd love for you to share your story, Kay, because I think you have a good kind of middle of the road story. It wasn't a home birth, but
yeah. Right. So I am on Renegade Nutrition. So I obviously lean on the natural side of life, and I tend to go that way. And I watched a documentary too that was saying about how higher C-section risks with epidurals. So I knew at the time, I was like, well, number one, I'm scared of needles. Like, get that away from me. And I didn't want the risk of cesarean because of the epidural. So I knew at the time I didn't want that. But I also at the time was living in a super small apartment, kind of a stressful lifestyle at the time. So I wouldn't have felt kind of at my most peace in our little apartment that wasn't ours, kind of dungy. I don't know.
Which is just such another attribute to it's just not right for everybody.
Right.
You felt more at peace in a hospital.
Right. And I did. And I thought, and then my husband thought, so I did the natural route in a hospital. Which I did really love, and it worked out. I stuck to my guns with the doctors, and there were a lot of suggestions that I would just have to keep brushing off, so I was able to have my baby, Rosalind. I had my first daughter pretty fast at the hospital. I showed up, I woke up in 5-minute apart contractions, and I was just like, we gotta get to the hospital now. And we showed up, and they got me a hospital room. They're like, well, let me check you. And they're like, oh, you're at a 10. Oh, I was like, yes, I'm in, and then I had her within a few hours. Wow. Like, it was like bam kind of thing, which, but she was sunny side up. So, but it all worked, and then we just pushed, and Ring of Fire, we just did it. But with my boy, I was positive for strep B, and so then when I was at one of my appointments, my OB did check how far I was, and that's when she said I was a 6. You're in labor. We have to get you the antibiotic, and then you have to have it within 12 hours of that. And so I was like, but I'm not in labor, and they were like, but you have to have the antibiotic before you have them, and it's only good. So it was kind of the stress. Anyway, and so then I got the antibiotic, and then I wasn't in labor.
Because just to clarify, with the antibiotic, they want you to have the kid within 12 hours, right?
Yes,
so they give you the antibiotic, they want you to have the kid within 12 hours, but you're not actually having contractions.
Right. And, I had a little bit of swelling in my face or something where they were like, well, we can't give it to you again because the dose only lasts for 12.
Oh, like you were partially allergic?
Yes. And so they couldn't give me a second dose. There was something where I had that 12-hour window. And so, but I was like, I was mad. I even go, I'm not in labor. And then anyway, whatever. But so then they ended up, I knew I didn't want any Pitocin. I knew that would, kind of put me on a path I didn't want. So I did have them strip my membranes, but then with having no epidural after that, it was so painful because then you are, like doing some things that are artificial, and then your body's like, oh, well, that hurt. And so then anyway, so all that to say, I would not do that route again. That was very, very painful. But then I did end up having my son within a few hours, and it worked out. But looking back, I was like, I would never get checked at my final visit. I'll now say no to that. And I would not have them strip my membranes because it just set me on that path. So anyway, But in the end, it worked out good, extremely painful, but we got through it. And now I have a beautiful boy and a beautiful girl. So it works out. But and I'm so glad that I did do it natural. For me, that was really important, but I know a lot of people it's not, but for me, it worked out. And it is just crazy how, you don't know what's going to happen, but then here you are, and I liked, for me, the security of being in the hospital just in case something went wrong. But then for us, nothing did other than the pressure to have it faster. I don't know. It's all a toss-up.
Right.
So,
it is.
Right.
It's kind of like you might have interventions in the hospital that then necessitate being in a hospital. But again, all of this to say, first of all, like trust your own gut instincts and whatever you feel like is right. And I know so many people where it's like maybe the wife wants a home birth and the husband feels uncomfortable with that. Don't have a home birth if you guys aren't on the same page about it. And you can also have a really beautiful natural hospital birth. And again, like any nurse I've ever encountered personally, like in the OBGYN associates at least our local hospital has been amazing. Yeah,
they're wonderful. My OBs were wonderful. Like other than the I don't want my anyway, other than the timing of it, they're wonderful and everything felt good and safe, and they were there and they respected my wishes, and yeah, all is good.
And I have had friends who want to have a natural birth who have said, because they were at the hospital, I expected to have to push really hard for what I wanted, and I didn't. Like the nurses totally, I think more and more are respecting like the mom's choices. Yeah. But there's just, again, it's just personal preference, and there just are reasons why we wanted to be at home and knew, I had a healthy pregnancy. I'm a healthy person. I didn't have any reason to feel like we couldn't have
didn't have any
home birth
flags on your file.
Exactly.
For health, right.
If anything had been high risk at all, we would have been in a hospital. So it's not for everybody. It's definitely not for high risk pregnancies and all of that. But anyway, that was our experience, and that's part of why we chose to have a home birth, and hopefully we'll be able to have a home birth for the rest of our babies. But I will say, having had at least one home birth, like I feel like I got to check that box. And if something happens with our next birth and we need a hospital transfer for any reason or anything like that, I think it's nice that I still got to have this birth experience that was really amazing and was what I really wanted for myself and my daughter. And in the future, what happens, I'll know I at least got to have this experience.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
So I feel really empowered by it. And hopefully this episode is not discouraging and is more like encouraging for you of like, hey, we can do hard things. And just making the decision that is best for you, standing up for yourself, stick to your guns. And absolutely, you can have a wonderful intervention-free hospital birth, and hospitals will do what they can to respect your wishes. Just knowing that you're still, regardless of how wonderful the person you're with is, they're still part of the system that puts time limits on things and has their policies and procedures in place, and they have to follow them or they get fired. So they're going to follow them.
And we do respect their knowledge in like my best friend's an OB, and she is incredible, and she has saved so many lives in surgery, delivering babies. So that is that amazing advancement in technology in the hospital. So we do respect it for that. And then just for us, it's like, let's let our natural go as long as you can. And then we have that when we need it, which is gorgeous that we can have both sides of that coin. And when I was in the hospital, the doctor, they had some more students come in because they said that their students that had never seen a fully natural, untouched birth on their watch. They're like, come see this. You got to see what's going on.
Yeah, that happened to one of my friends as well. They said they'd never seen
a fully untouched,
unmedicated birth.
Fully. Wild. So, but that's just if you're curious about the natural, you can do it, you can do it, and then just have the medical team that's professional beside you. But do it as long as you can. And
if you're not, that's fine too. I think, we have like a good friend who's on the more natural side, and we asked her like, did you have home birth? And she was like, no, I wanted an epidural, and I know that's really terrible. And like, I was like, wait, no,
it's all good.
It's not terrible at all. Like, she was like, I just, like with an epidural, I had a really pleasant birth experience. And so I wanted that for my other kids. And I was like, great, then do that. Like, again, you're weighing the pros and the cons for you. And just because bad things can happen doesn't mean bad things will happen, right? Either way, the percentage of terrible outcomes is very small. So don't feel like if you need any sort of intervention that it means XYZ is going to go wrong. It doesn't guarantee that at all. It's a very small percentage of times that things do go wrong. It's just important to be aware of what the risks are. In any scenario. So thanks Noah for helping us with this episode.
We love that you're here, Noah.
Yeah, we're so thankful you're here. And for anybody who's been trying to get pregnant and having a hard time, you should go back and listen to our story of conceiving her, because hopefully it will give you hope. And soon you'll be holding your own. She's got her rainbow blankie here because she's our little rainbow baby. Oops, bonking Mama's microphone. So, okay, well, hey, thanks for listening to these stories, and go be renegades.
Go be renegades.
Go be renegades.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Nutrition Podcast.
Please keep in mind that this podcast is an educational service that provides general health information. The content on this podcast is not a substitute for direct, personal, professional medical care and diagnosis. You should always talk to your doctor before making a dietary or lifestyle change. Go be renegades!
Go be renegades!